From the studios of Staten Island Community Television, you're watching In the Bleachers, the TV show for the world's most passionate sports fans. Hello, everyone. I'm Jaime Hixson.
Hi, everybody. I am the Jets grief counselor, also known as Eric Rosen.
Well, I just have one simple question for you. Are you ready for some football? Because I definitely am. And the season officially kicked off, for lack of a better phrase, this past Thursday. That seems to be the recurring theme now. The Super Bowl champion starts the season first, not on a Sunday, but on a Thursday now.
Yep, and they played against the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs basically were the Chiefs, for all intents and purposes, winning 42-27 in the first game. And it was a bunch of guys, including Alex Smith, who had no interceptions over 300 yards, and it was around 4 touchdowns. He threw a 78-yard pass. He threw a 75-yarder. He threw a nice 50-yarder to Tyreek Hill. Like, every game, every play in this game was basically designed very well for the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. They took advantage of a lot of sore spots in that Pats defense, which usually it comes up very well. If you think about it, Matt Patricia has been one of those underappreciated coordinators in the NFL, and yet this was one of the worst performances. In fact, they had a lead at the half. This was the first time it took 83 games for the Pats to lose with a lead going into the second half at home.
Yep.
And this is the first time that Kansas City has won in New England since 1990. I was 5 years old.
Yeah, which is really saying a lot considering those two go back to the old AFL. But if you want to look at why the game resulted the way it did, you can only look at two things. One, echoing what Eric said before, that Patriot defense looks really, really vulnerable. Actually, you can argue that there are 3 reasons why the Patriots wound up losing to the Chiefs. One, that Patriot defense looked really vulnerable. 2, the Patriots miss Julian Edelman big time. And 3, we may have seen the next talented rookie running back star in this game, Kareem Hunt. The same Kareem Hunt who fumbled on his very first NFL carry. And what happens? Kareem Hunt bounces back with a little veteran encouragement from teammates to get 200-plus yards from scrimmage. That was about as impressive a performance as I have ever seen from any rookie running back in this game in at least the last 10 years or so.
Oh, it was very impressive. Like I mentioned, that 75-plus yard touchdown he got. And the speed that he had down the middle of the field, very deceptive at first, but then goes for the kill. You got to roll up that. And then Tyreek Hill, last year, he was seldom used on special teams plays, some end arounds. Now they really want to, this year with Kansas City, they want to expand the playbook with Tyreek Hill and have him do more receiving plays, which is really good. I like that. And, they're in the post-Jamal Charles era. Things are really working out. And Patrick Mahomes is getting a front row seat of what it takes to be a quarterback in this league, and he's got a good guy to tutor him in Alex Smith.
And all of this talk about whether Patrick Mahomes should be the guy to take over immediately, I think you can put that on hold for just a little while longer because Alex Smith can still play this game.
I heard this weekend it was like 12, 13 road teams won this weekend. It was the week of the road team. Not only that, we saw some questionable plays. How about opening your season with an onside kick, a.k.a. the Tennessee Titans, in their 26-16 loss to the Oakland Raiders? How do you do something like that? I remember Super Bowl 44, the second half. The Saints, I think it was in the third quarter, they opened it with an onside kick. Questionable at the time, but worked out for them. That was a different situation. You don't open the season with an onside kick.
Especially with a team that's as fine-tuned as the Raiders. They're too well-coached and, quite frankly, way too talented to fall for anything of that magnitude.
We unfortunately saw some injuries that took place. Kevin White, the receiver, that was supposed to be highly touted since coming the 11th overall pick out of West Virginia in 2015 for the Chicago Bears. How many games has he played? Oh, yeah, 4 games in 2 seasons. And this year, he was supposed to be the main guy since Alshon Jeffrey left to go to Philadelphia for that 1-year contract. Now, it looks like his season is pretty much done. We're accustomed to seeing, unfortunately, they lost Cameron Meredith to an ACL tear. Now they just lost yet another receiving offensive weapon. So that really hurts them. That puts Mike Glenn in a very precarious spot for sure. But at least they got Jordan Howard. Other than that, how about the unfortunate David Johnson injury?
Yeah, breaking his collarbone during their self-destruction in Detroit. They're being nice when they're saying that he could be out about 12 or 13 weeks. Broken collarbones can take a long time for somebody to return from. At this rate, he might be back for the last 3 games of the year, but other than that, all bets are off.
Let's go into all the Week 1 games that are fun, especially the AFC North. You got Steelers, Browns, and Roethlisberger got his 21st win against this team with 2 touchdowns to Jesse James. You know, not the Jesse James from the Wild Wild West, folks. We're talking about the tight end Jesse James right here.
And as far as the Browns are concerned, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Deshaun Kaiser is now their starting quarterback, and what happens? Commits a couple of turnovers in the game.
He got sacked 7 times. So that offensive line that was highly touted going into this year still has a lot of things to work out, especially against that Steelers pass rush. And yes, the first touchdown that the Steelers scored in this game was on a blocked punt.
Yeah.
That was another unfortunate thing on special teams.
Well, give the Browns at least a little bit of credit for one thing. At least they're building towards the future the right way. It's with kids like Kaiser and Myles Garrett, who unfortunately got hurt.
He didn't even get to play yesterday.
Didn't even suit up for the game, if I'm not mistaken. And also, the kid from Michigan, Jabril Peppers.
I know, Jabril Peppers and Njoku at tight end. So they do have some good pieces moving forward for sure. I think this is still going to be a relatively young season. I think they're going to have some growing pains, but I believe Hugh Jackson has his team going in the right direction for sure. As for the Browns, you know, Le'Veon Bell finally ended his holdout, signed a $12.1 million franchise tag, which honestly he should get a little more than that, and I see why he held out, but he wasn't a factor in this game. And they wanted to seldom use him because the fact that he didn't go to a single part of training camp, didn't play 1 snap in the preseason, so they want to ease him back in before they really have him explode in what could be a big contract year for him. But Antonio Brown made a huge leaping catch.
Yeah.
Several leaping catches.
There was that fantastic catch that he made that pretty much sealed their victory in Cleveland yesterday.
The 38-yarder with about 2:26 to go. And what about T.J. Watt? 2 sacks and an interception in his NFL debut, following his brother into the business.
Speaking of impressive NFL debuts, JJ's kid brother wound up having quietly a very, very good game defensively for the Steelers, a team that really needs to get younger defensively, and I think they might have found an unsung hero in JJ's kid brother. You mentioned the sacks that took place.
7.
Yeah. Will the real Jacksonville Jaguars please stand up? They got 10, count them, 10 sacks in Houston yesterday.
And
it got so bad. It got so bad that Tom Savage, the guy who is basically masquerading to be a starting quarterback right now, wound up getting benched for Deshaun Watson. Neither of those 2 young men could do anything against that Jaguar defense yesterday.
Who picked Jacksonville?
And you picked Jacksonville to win that game, and you were right. A lot of people forget, with all of the problems that Jacksonville has at quarterback, they're still very good at running back because now they have Leonard Fournette. In fact, he had an impressive rookie debut as well, exactly 100 yards rushing and a score. Unfortunately, Allen Robinson got hurt.
Tore his ACL.
Now he's out for the rest of the season, which means more difficulties for whoever the Jaguar quarterback is going to be next weekend. going down the road.
Oh, it's going to be Blake Bortles right now because between it's him right now. They're betting the farm on him. He needs to have an impressive year, but he's got to give it up. His defense really came through for him, and Leonard Fournette. That's what they got to do. They're going to have their defense pound really hard, especially guys like Calais Campbell, who had 4 sacks yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they got him in the offseason. He was a highly touted free agent prospect, and it really showed why. And Dante Fowler had a coming out party yesterday.
Yeah.
Finally, the first year he comes out of Florida, gets an unfortunate injury in training camp. Last year wasn't his best season, but this year could be his breakout season for Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
And A.J. Bowie getting him in that secondary was smart. Tayshaun Gibson made a big interception yesterday off of Deshaun Watson. But you know what? Deshaun Watson got a big touchdown to DeAndre Hopkins, a 4-yarder that made 19-7. But unfortunately, Tommy Bohannon, if that name is familiar to Jet fans, the former fullback for the Jets, now with the Jaguars, got his first NFL touchdown, making it 26-7. So at the end of the day, they won 29-7. Congratulations.
Now we get to talk about some of the stuff that happened elsewhere in the NFL. Good to see that the Detroit Lions are making a comeback, for lack of a better word, because that's exactly what they did yesterday, trailing against Arizona. And Matthew Stafford,
17-9.
Yep, and Matthew Stafford, who's mastered the art of the come-from-behind victory. He scored some really big victories in what is now his 9th NFL season, orchestrated another charge yesterday.
That's why he got the big historic contract, because last year he led the Lions on a historic record, 8 fourth-quarter overtime wins.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he got that big $130 million contract extension with the $50 million signing bonus. Deservedly so. And look what he did. 2 big touchdowns, 45 and 10 yards to Kenny Golladay, who was impressive in training camp and the preseason. So we're seeing another compliment. Besides Golden Tate, we got another receiver with Eric Ebron, and Theo Riddick made some impressive catches. He's a good pass catching specialist. Mm-hmm. And you got Amir Abdullah. This offense is primed and ready to go, and the defense, you know what, did its best to hold things up.
Amir Abdullah is a good, serviceable player coming out of the backfield, but quite frankly, Matthew Stafford deserves so much more to work with because he can only do so much with guys like Golden Tate and Amir Abdullah, 2 guys who would probably be second stringers on other teams to work with him on that offense.
Well, that's why Kenny Golladay, was impressive yesterday in the fourth quarter, those big touchdowns, and the reason why the Lions won. And the Cardinals, unfortunately, with the injury now to David Johnson, if you're a fantasy owner, he was number 1 on every fantasy football list you can imagine because of what he did last year of all those all-purpose yards and combined touchdowns. Now, if you have him, dump him right now, get some other players in the waiver wire. And as for the team itself, I really feel for them now. Mm-hmm. Going to in the coming weeks ahead, this could be a rough year for Arizona Vegetarians.
And it's funny that you're bringing up this next game right now, Eagles and Redskins. I happened to be in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania just yesterday to visit a friend of mine. And all I got in that small town that I was in, Bangor, Pennsylvania to be exact, turned out to be the Eagles against the Redskins, which meant I was able to listen to Merrill Reese, who's been calling Eagles games on the radio forever, doing the action yesterday, and he called quite a performance by Carson Wentz, especially considering this one touchdown where he beat 2 defenders out of potential sacks to get, I think it was a 60 to 65-yard touchdown pass.
58-yard
58-yard touchdown pass
to Nelson Aguilar. That was unbelievable. And the weapons he has this year. He's got Alshon Jeffrey. He's got Torrey Smith. Nelson Aguilar is going to have a good sophomore season for this organization. And you look at the backfield, like LeGarrette Blount had a touchdown yesterday in his Eagles regular season debut. Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, got rocked for 4 sacks by that Eagles pass rush, including a strip sack that was picked up by Fletcher Cox for a 20-yard touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
They won 30-17.
Yep.
It was a close game at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So give it up to the Eagles for winning. I'm very happy for the Eagles. Now,
speaking of close games, Falcons and Bears literally went down to the last 2 seconds of the game, and it took a big sack by the Falcons defense. It was essentially the last play of the game to clinch it for them.
Yeah, it was crazy. 23-17. And here's the insane part. All Jordan Howard had to do was catch a simple pass at the 1, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And that cost his team huge.
Yep.
Or in the words of our president, bigly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, simple catch. But unfortunately, Brooks Reed got the game-ending sack, and boom, right there. The Falcons won 20 by the skin of their chins. Mm-hmm. Now they debut their new stadium Sunday night against Green Bay. That's going to be a hell of a match.
That is going to be one hell of a primetime game that NBC scored for the second week of the regular season. And this is something that has been talked about as opposed to last year. Last year's primetime games, especially the Thursday night games, were really bad. But now we're getting much better matchups for primetime, be it Thursday nights or Sunday nights. The first 2 Sunday nights, NBC is going to make a killing in the ratings.
I love this Thursday night game, and even though it's Bengals-Texans, these are two teams who are coming off terrible losses. Mm-hmm. They only have a short time to turn around the problems that plagued them this coming week. We're going to see Deshaun Watson get his first start.
Yeah.
There's no way that after what O'Brien did, sacking Savage after the first half and putting Watson in the second half, there's no way he's going to return to that same formula. He's going to put Watson as a starter this week. And this time, Adam Pac-Man Jones will be able to play. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. But Vontaze Burfict, on the other hand, is still suspended for this game and the next game.
Yeah.
Those are some important pieces. And John Ross didn't even play for Cincinnati, unfortunately, as well as Joe Mixon. Mm-hmm. Not having those rookies didn't help either. Mm-hmm. We'll get into that game in a bit, but Raiders beat the Titans 26-16, and we saw the debut of Giorgio Tavecchio.
Yeah, that's right. And also, leading up to this game was the contract dispute between the Raiders and Sebastian Janikowski. Fortunately, they were able to settle their differences to a point where Janikowski was able to make some big kicks for them yesterday. But
no, Janikowski didn't play yesterday. He actually is on injury reserve with a bad back.
Ah, that's right.
That's where Tavecchio came in. He had 20, 52, 52, and 43 yards in his debut. Marshawn Lynch, 18 carries for 76 yards.
Didn't miss a beat. The numbers don't show too much, but Marshawn Lynch looked like he was basically in his 4th season in the NFL when he made his Raider debut yesterday.
And Carr got 2 touchdowns, 262 yards, deserving of that new $125 million contract. But, you got to give up to the Titans. They did try their hardest, but at the end of the day, they just came up short. Now, speaking of teams that came up real short, the Bengals by 0. Goose egg, 20-0. Andy Dalton had 5 turnovers. 4 interceptions, tying career high, and a fumble.
Where to begin with this game? I mean, granted, this is a long-time division rivalry between the two folks, but teams just have to prepare or just execute better in games like this, and that leads into the primetime game from last night, which I'm going to touch on later, but how about the job that the Ravens defense, maligned going into this season, did against him yesterday?
Well, that's why they got Brandon Carr and they got Tony Jefferson in the offseason to help that secondary along with Eric Weddle, and it really showed. Brandon Carr got his first interception in a Ravens uniform off of Andy Dalton. Flacco didn't have such a great performance, if you look statistically, 9 of 1,721 yards, but what he lacked in numbers, he did make up in some big throws yesterday, and including getting Jeremy Maclin on a 48-yard run and catch.
And how about adding Jeremy Maclin to that receiving core? Now, if he can stay healthy, Flacco can have himself a really good receiver to work with. Not that he didn't have that before, but Jeremy Maclin's a really proven receiver.
And with and hopefully Rashad Perriman will stay healthy too, because ever since he came out of Central Florida, he's been a flight risk to be on the field. So right there, this is his year to break out. As for the Rams, they came out guns blazing. Jared Goff got his first career NFL win against the Colts, but we have to keep in mind this was the Andrew Luck-less Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, and while the Colts were without Luck, the Rams who had a contract dispute of their own with Aaron Donald, he was able to settle differences with them, and he wound up getting benched as well for the game. Turns out they didn't really need him because, as it turns out, the score was 46-9.
They were up 37-9 at one point. It was ridiculous.
Will the real Los Angeles Rams please stand up? By the way,
37-3, sorry.
if you look at the difference in crowd size between yesterday and Sunday night when USC hosted Stanford, you couldn't find one single empty seat for that USC game.
Well, of course not.
Whereas for opening day in LA for the Rams, there were probably 55 to 60,000 empty seats in that stadium. Do you really think that the people in Los Angeles actually care about the Rams' return? If they're going to continue to get empty seats at the Coliseum, then what's going to happen when the Chargers play their first home game in a soccer stadium, which seats about 25 to 30,000?
Well, it's the Rams who played yesterday, but because the Rams are going to be sharing a new stadium with the Chargers in Inglewood sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. That's why they're both playing at their respective stadiums that are temporary right now.
But winning breeds bigger crowds, and if the Rams can continue to play the way they did yesterday, maybe they will be able to draw bigger crowds.
And how about here's the crappy thing about this Colts situation at quarterback. They made the deal to get Jacoby Brissett, but of course he's only had a few days to be with the team. That's why they weren't going to rush him in as a starting quarterback. Scott Tolzien has been with the team since last year. He knows the system. That's why he got the starting gig over Stephen Morris, who honestly is no better. These are guys that should be relegated to second and third string status on any normal NFL team. And you look at the really incredibly bad passes. His first pass, Tremaine Johnson gets an interception on it, returns it for a 39-yard pick six.
Wow.
LaMarcus Joyner, 29-yard pick six, all in the first half. And he still has yet to win a game, Scott Tolzien, in his NFL maligned career.
All the more reason why maybe the Colts, since they made this deal, should give Jacoby Brissett a crash course in the playbook. Don't you think?
I think without a doubt they should, but it's going to take some. I would say if things don't improve by the second half of next week, don't be shocked to see Jacoby in at that point. If things don't or possibly week 3. It all depends, though, on Andrew Luck, too.
From what I understand, he's not going to be available until October, though.
So if that's the case, then they really got to speed things up with Jacoby. Now, the Panthers got a huge victory in San Francisco. Fortunately, the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch first game debut did not work out well. They only scored 3 points the entire game, but Cam Newton threw a pair of touchdowns following San Francisco turnovers. And guess who your quarterback is? Brian Hoyer.
Oh, brother.
193 yards and 2 turnovers. What do you expect?
I think the 49er fans are expecting their team to be dreadful once again. Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen, anyone?
How many years has it been since the 49ers have not scored in the first half? How many years?
It's got to be at least 25 to 30 years.
40.
40 years since they last scored in the first half of a game.
Since they were held scoreless in the first half.
Amazing.
And they accomplished that yesterday.
So that was before the Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Bill Walsh, and Steve Young era.
217 total yards altogether.
Do you see what happens when you have players, franchise-capable players that can help lead a franchise to the next level? That's all you need.
And how about Green Bay getting that decisive 9-yard touchdown run by Ty Montgomery, and they beat the Seahawks 17-9. The Seahawks, where is the offense, if there is any? The pass rush, the defense at least, held its own in certain spots. I can't say anything bad about the defense. But that penalty against Aaron was complete and utter a word I cannot say on the air right now, but it starts with a B and ends with a T. And, that wasn't even he barely grazed his elbow on the guy's face.
As it turns out, this is really no surprise when it comes to controversial calls, because if you remember just 5 years ago, there was the fail Mary, as you so eloquently put it, that took place in Seattle. So this is nothing new.
But that was complete bogus right there. The touchdown was nullified because of one of the other players with an illegal block in the backfield. So that nullified it. But the fact that Jeremy Lin got kicked out for not even throwing a punch, the referees really need to get it together. They're not in the preseason anymore. The regular season is here. They need to get the calls right. Because calls like that could impact games.
Now, it's time that we discuss what happened in our neck of the woods yesterday, specifically last night's game. If any Giant fan had any worries, or better yet, any suspicions about how last night's game would turn out, well, last night was a prime example. You look at the last 7 games, including playoffs, going back to last year, the Giants have scored no more than 17 points in either of those games.
How many fingers am I holding up, folks?
3.
And what is that symbolizing right there? The amount of points that the Giants scored last night. That sorry to sound
once again
like that.
just goes to show you, if you don't score in the red zone, first of all, you're not going to win. Not field goals. I'm talking 6 points.
This was a team
You
that...
must convert in the red zone if you're going to try and win games. That's number one.
That's why they got Brandon Marshall, but yet, how many targets? He only had...
Brandon Marshall was targeted twice yesterday.
And had 1 catch. What the hell did you sign him for?
If you're going to make good use of a free agent signing like him, you better be prepared for it, because this guy's been chomping at the bit to try and play with a contender. He finally got that chance with the team, which supposedly is
ready to go.
And maybe contending for a division title, much less a Super Bowl title. But he only gets targeted twice in the game. That's just horrendous.
That's horse crap right there, if you ask me. And then...
Not only that, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but the Giants really did miss Odell Beckham Jr. yesterday.
Oh, without a doubt.
Nothing against the other guys like Sterling Shepard, like
Evan
Brandon
Ingram.
Marshall, but they had 2 capable receivers to throw the ball to, and Eli Manning, for some reason, could not hit his target. And another thing, isn't the idea of having your offense on the field to try and take time off the clock so you can try and set up a good scoring drive? Because the Giants very rarely did that yesterday, except for when they got their only points. Other than that, the Giants got 200 yards plus of total offense for the entire game. After that, all I saw was Dak Prescott hitting either it was either Cole Beasley with that ridiculous behind-the-shoulder catch.
That was one of the best catches of the evening.
Probably the best catch of the entire evening, and an obvious SportsCenter highlight.
Yeah.
So it was either Cole Beasley with his behind-the-shoulder catch, or Dez Bryant, when he wasn't too busy talking trash with Janoris Jenkins, coming up with some big catches in the game. The numbers didn't show it, but he had at least 2 or 3 big catches in last night's game. Jason Witten, who broke the all-time receiving yardage record on the Cowboys. Imagine that. He has more yards receiving for his career than Drew Pearson or Michael Irvin or Tony Hill. I mean, that is just amazing. Consider the fact that he's a tight end, probably the second greatest tight end that I've ever seen play the game.
Besides Tony Gonzalez, honestly.
After Tony Gonzalez, it just goes to show you the type of career that Jason Witten has had. But again, this Giant offense has only reiterated the problems that I saw them have last night.
Last year, they were one of the top 5 teams in total offensive yards, but yet they averaged less than 20 points a game. This was the time, especially with a guy like Brandon Marshall, who's a red zone specialist. You should have utilized him. The pass rush, again, needs to be better. And the left sideline, which you and I have talked about for so many months on the show.
That entire offensive line is completely suspect. Their running game is completely suspect. How are they supposed to win with Paul Perkins, a guy who barely got a sniff of yardage yesterday?
Well, that's due to the offensive line not giving him the blocks that he needs to be able to make the play.
It's way too much to be asking of Eli Manning to try and win a game for them. You just don't do that. That's why the Giants need a good, capable, power running back like who the Cowboys have in Ezekiel Elliott to try and get them some yardage. I mean, granted, Elliott, his numbers did not show much, but he made the big runs when he was supposed to.
And how about the Jets? They were just...
Nice to see that they answered a lot of people's critics. It was progressively worse.
They scored. The only consolation, folks, they scored more points than the Giants. Other than that, the rushing...
I hardly think that 12 points to 3 is any consolation. It was so bad that even on an interception return, the guy was practically tackled by his own teammate. Although when you think about it and see the replay, his teammate was actually pushed into him by one of the Bills on that return.
And that should have been penalized right there.
And of course, Josh McCown's had 2 turnovers yesterday. If this doesn't show that he's not the guy to try and lead them this season, I don't know what is.
And this John Morton offense, where was it? Combined 38 yards for Bilal Powell and Matt Forte. And the fact they gave up over 190 yards, the rushing defense, which is usually one of the things that the Jets specialize. They are a top 10 defense when it comes to stopping the run. Gave up 190 yards week 1, including 110 to Shady McCoy, who ran roughshod around the edge. And then on top of that, Andre Holmes and that 1-yard catch. Tolbert was able to get a 1-yard rushing touchdown. It just really killed me, this entire... And how about the punting the ball, too?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
In the fourth quarter, when you don't have many minutes to go, and you should go for it.
That's not showing any confidence in the offense whatsoever. And quite frankly, can anything on the Jets, offensively, defensively, special teams, coaching-wise, front office, inspire any kind of confidence in their fans at all? Not even close. And guess who the Jets have next weekend? The Raiders. So you know it's going to be at least a 40 to 50 point blitz by that Raider offense and defense.
I shudder to think what's going to happen to this Jets team. If they lost just by 9 points against the Bills, I shudder to think what's going to happen to them when they have to go all the way to the West Coast and play a Raiders team
that has Derek Carr and
Cooper,
Marshawn Lynch and Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree.
Jared Cook at tight end.
And a defense that's licking their chops right now, seeing who's next on the schedule.
Oh, yes.
A team that they dominate. Emphasis on dominate at home lifetime.
I fear for McCown's life now that you got Khalil Mack's going to be breathing down his neck. And you got Bruce Irvin on that defense too. You think about it, those guys are going to basically knock the crap out of him because that offensive line won't be able to protect him. And that's the thing. You stop the run of the Jets, and you have to force McCown to throw the ball. And when you have to force him to throw the ball, guess what? He doesn't get it done. And the only weapon on that Jets offense is Jermaine Kearse, who was only on the team for no more than a week since they traded Sheldon Richardson.
At least Kearse showed a little bit of spark catching 7 passes yesterday. But quite frankly, if he had another quarterback working with him, he would be probably averaging maybe 10 catches per game.
Well, that's why the Jets, I loved how McCown was asked about, do you think the Jets team is having the terrible season, the throwing it in the towel type of year? And of course, he's going to say, no, I think we need to click together.
Kearse has no idea.
No, it was McCown who said.
McCown has no idea what he's gotten himself into. He thought things in Tampa and in Cleveland and in Arizona and in Detroit and in Carolina, 5 teams where he's bounced around with were that bad. He knows nothing of what's going on with this laughably embarrassing Jets franchise.
He hasn't won a game since 2015. It's 5 starts since he's had a victory. He's 1-17 his last 18 games. This is a joke. I know that Colin Kaepernick has the ire of Sony fans, and because of the fact that the NFL is a business, nobody wants to hire him. But considering who's in the league, you got guys like Tolzien, Hoyer, all right? Hoyer and McCown as starting quarterback, and Tom Savage at one point was a starting quarterback, and yet Colin Kaepernick still can't get a job.
Scott Tolzien, Brian Hoyer, Tom Savage, Chad Henne, Blake Bortles, Tyrod Taylor.
Well, Tyrod, give him this.
Tyrod Taylor is fool's gold. I'm not impressed with him as a player. He's a good athlete, but quite frankly, he's not starting material. The Bills, I can guarantee, will not win and go to the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback. Tyrod Taylor is complete garbage. But the point is, Colin Kaepernick has got to get a job somewhere, because I'll tell you right now, he's better than maybe 10 to 15 of the quarterbacks that are starting for their respective teams right now.
And don't be surprised if his phone is ringing this season.
It should be ringing this season, but it's not.
And I think a team will be brave enough to take him on and deal with whatever consequences may come from it.
Well, on the bright side, we did have some really intriguing action in the college circuit over the weekend.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts basically in that Bama team basically took Fresno State to task, 41-10, 154 yards to the ground. This guy is a great dual threat guy.
What about the best game of the day? Oklahoma and Ohio State. Finally, Baker Mayfield proved he is capable of being considered NFL draft material next April.
3 touchdowns, 27 of 35, 329 yards. Unbelievable what he did against this team. I mean,
I can guarantee you Baker Mayfield is probably better than 10 to 15 of the NFL's starting quarterbacks from their respective teams right now, especially after his performance yesterday.
J.T. Barrett had some unfortunate misses on some big plays, but at least J.K. Dobbins, the freshman running back, is one of the bright spots for this Buckeyes team going forward. But Oklahoma now, I think, has established itself as the team right now in not
probably
just the
team after Alabama.
That's for sure. And Baker Mayfield has put himself into the conversation for the Heisman Trophy.
Oh, without question. What about him spiking the middle of the field with the Oklahoma banner?
That's basically a slap in the face, a spit in the face, and basically every other negative connotation you could think of when it comes to Oklahoma State fans.
You know what else this was too? Payback. Payback for Oklahoma losing at home to them last year.
Well, he wanted to stick it to the in the horseshoe, and he did. And now Ohio State, guess who they're going to take their anger out on this weekend? Army. I feel sorry, even though they have that triple option and they're undefeated right now. But guess what, Army? The Black Knights. You basically have an angry giant.
And while Ohio State fell flat on their faces in a nationally televised game, their hated rivals, Michigan, no problem with their game over the weekend.
Yeah, they destroyed
Cincinnati
36-14.
It was actually close at one point. Cincinnati really gave them some problems for about 2.5 to 3 quarters. But then what happens?
Ty Isaac, 133 yards rushing. That guy had a hell of a game for them.
And USC wound up getting themselves a huge win at home over Stanford, as Sam Darnold wound up having his coming out party of his own.
4 touchdowns, 2 each to Stephen Mitchell and Deontay Burnett. Darnold went 21 of 26, 316 yards, and snapped their 3-game losing streak to Stanford at home. This was huge. 623 total yards they racked up in this game. Yeah, Sam Darnold also will be in the Heisman conversation too.
And it looks like Clemson is still trying to prove some people wrong, and they did this time. Big home game with Auburn, and it was the Clemson defense that came out and just put on an outstanding display.
And the starting quarterback rushing for 2 touchdowns, Kelly Bryant, who's basically the starter now after Deshaun Watson left to go to the NFL. And then my 2 favorite guys who also should be in the conversation for the Heisman, Trace McSorley and
Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, you may not know this, but Saquon Barkley is actually a local kid. He was born in the Bronx, but because he grew up in because he was born in a really shady neighborhood in the Bronx, his parents moved him to Pennsylvania so he could have a better life for himself. And as it turns out, he wound up having more than that. He had an outstanding high school career, and now in his junior season, he has basically taken what he did last year, helping Penn State win the Big Ten title and almost beat USC in the Rose Bowl. This time, they had probably their biggest win against their longtime rivals, Pitt, this past weekend.
140 miles separates these 2 schools in Pennsylvania. You got State College on the east side, you got Pittsburgh on the west side.
And there was a time when that rivalry was really, really ugly. Unfortunately, they put a stop to the rivalry many years ago. Of course, one of the things that stopped the rivalry was the fact that Penn State wound up joining the Big Ten, and they wound up severing ties with that series.
And Pittsburgh's in the ACC, so therefore, they can. But last year, in fact, Pitt defeated Penn State, and that hurt Penn State's ability to go to the college football playoffs. That was one of those victories losses that was used against them. This year, though, Penn State took Pitt to task, and they won 33-14. Washington easily took care of Montana 63-7. Jake Browning, 2 touchdowns, 259 yards. And how about this guy, Dante Pettis? He already tied Deshaun Jackson's record of return touchdowns. He's looking for the NCAA record.
Yep. I wonder how Lane Kiffin is doing with his big job over at Florida Atlantic. Turns out he's not off to a good start. He's lost his first 2 games, including this past weekend in Wisconsin.
And what about the freshman for Wisconsin, Taylor, 223 yards? Yeah, Jonathan Taylor, 223 yards, 3 touchdowns. He, when it comes to Wisconsin, great offensive line, good running backs. They always produce good running backs, as you see. Now, Mason Rudolph and the Cowboys defeated South Alabama Jaguars of the Sun Belt 44-7. Rudolph, 335 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran for a score 2. He's another guy who's probably in the conversation for the Heisman.
And LSU had no problem beating Chattanooga.
Oh, yeah, the Mocs of the FCS team, and yet they were penalized 11 times for 74 yards. I bet you Ed Ogeron, who's the new head coach, by the way, for LSU, ain't too thrilled about that.
And how about the performance Georgia had going into South Bend and getting this ridiculous touchdown catch? If you saw it on YouTube or any other social media platform, you would not even believe it. He made Odell Beckham Jr. look like Gary Yepremian.
And what about Rodrigo Blankenship with the game-winning 30-yard field goal with about 39 remaining to help Georgia win their first game in South Bend? This is the first time these 2 schools ever played each other in South Bend. This is the first time they played each other since the 1980s. So I believe it was a national title game. Yeah, 2019, Georgia defeated Notre Dame. So Georgia is for real, too.
And with all of the talk that Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen and Baker Mayfield have been getting, everyone seems to want to forget about Lamar Jackson, last year's Heisman Trophy winner. They think that he's just a flash in the pan, but what did he do? Gets his first big conference win of the year as he goes into Chapel Hill to beat a tough North Carolina squad thanks to 500-plus yards of offense by himself. If this doesn't show that Lamar Jackson needs to be considered a top 10 pick in April, then I don't know what will.
What about Jalen Smith, the junior on the team, who's huge, 9 catches, career high 183 yards and a score for Louisville. But yet Jackson had 525 total yards, 6 scores, 3 of them on the ground, 3 of them passing. Yes, he could be the first ever person to repeat as a Heisman Trophy winner. That has never been done in college football history. He could be the first. As for, how about another Jackson? Josh Jackson and the Virginia Tech Hokies took care of the Delaware Blue Hens 27-0. Kansas State, Manhattan is really doing well this year.
Yeah. And to think, Bill Snyder, who's approaching 80 years of age, is in his second tour of duty as Kansas State's head coach. He already has the football field named in his honor. This is his 26th season coaching in Manhattan. He's already the school's all-time winningest coach, and he continues to do an outstanding job with that program.
They beat the living snot out of the Charlotte 49ers, the team from the Conference USA, 55-7, and Kendall Adams had a fumble and an interception return for a touchdown just in the first half on defense. Washington State, the Cougars beat the Boise State Broncos in triple overtime, 47-44.
Outstanding performance by those two teams, and a big, big win for Washington State, too.
And how about TCU stifling and taking care of Arkansas 28-7?
See, these are the types of games that I want to see programs like TCU and Kansas State schedule for down the road. TCU got a huge road victory against a very tough opponent from the SEC.
And avenging their double overtime loss from last year. And then you look at the Volunteers, took care of the Sycamores of Indiana State 42-7. Right now, the Volunteers are preparing for the big matchup against my Florida Gators, who lost Week 1 33-17 against Michigan. Unfortunately, couldn't play Week 2 due to Hurricane Irma against Northern Colorado. So they are playing their first game in a few weeks. By the way, our thoughts, we just want to send our thoughts and prayers to the people of Texas who are still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey.
And Florida for being pelted by Irma.
I know. And by the way, how's your family doing?
I just spoke to them earlier this afternoon via text message. Everyone is doing well. My cousin who's in Orlando, his house was barely touched by Irma, which is now downgraded to a tropical storm. And as for my Miami relatives, it's a good thing that they live in a house that's built like a tank, because even though there was minimal damage to their roof, somehow they were able to escape unscathed. I mean, aside from problems with not having any electricity or poor cell service.
I'm hearing now 6 million people in Florida are without power as we speak, which is going to take probably weeks, if not months, to correct that situation and get people's power back up and running.
And it already canceled a whole bunch of football games, specifically in the college ranks. And the Dolphins versus Buccaneers game, which was supposed to be scheduled as the opener yesterday, it's been pushed back to November.
Well, yeah, they both have a break in Week 11, so they had to move it to Week 11 at that time. And there was no way they were going to be able to get this game off. And you know what? At least, there was not as it's just really sad that it happened, but I feel bad for that. I also feel bad for the people in the Caribbean too.
The Caribbean got destroyed. If you saw some of the video, the Virgin Islands, you barely recognize it.
Barbuda really got hammered.
Barbuda got destroyed. My parents' country, the Dominican Republic, that was completely flattened. I mean, it just makes you realize how grateful we, not just as New Yorkers, but as Americans in general, are to live in a country where we have the resources available to try and patch things up once again.
And the generosity that people have, too, including guys like J.J. Watt, who, by the way, I commend him, as not only as a professional player, but as a man for what he's done. He started a modest $250,000 goal project to help people affected by Hurricane Harvey, and it's already reached $30+ million. That is just outstanding in and of itself. Give him a lot of credit. My hat's off to him.
There's a reason why he's really, really popular in the NFL, and also why his jersey sales have gone through the roof. It's funny that you mention what happened with Irma, because the Hurricane Irma actually forced Yankees versus Rays out of St. Petersburg and up here to be played at Citi Field.
Yeah, today, tomorrow, and Wednesday afternoon. So the Yankees practically are playing home games, even though they are the visiting team technically, but technically they are kind of home.
Yeah,
it's
they literally are at home, and the best part is the Yankees were kind enough to fly some of the Rays players' families into town so they could be with their husbands for this series, and it also cut down on hotel expenses. Now it's just the Rays and their families who only have to look for hotels in the area.
And I heard they even lowered ticket prices. In
Yes,
fact,
they did.
Like $25, I think, for like box seats or like in the field level.
Which is great, considering that the Yankees usually charge about $1,250 for legend seats.
But at the heart of all this, we really truly hope that all the people, that as many people got out alive, unscathed. I believe that's the case. And I know your possessions, a lot of your houses might be destroyed or partially destroyed, but at least you know what, you have your lives intact. You can rebuild your stuff, but you can't rebuild your lives. And I'm glad that people did get out. A lot of people got out in time. And, I was upset when I heard that people did stay, but at the same time, I have to understand too that they it's their home. They don't want to leave it. But you know what? I'm happy that your family's okay. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting us know.
Of course.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, Miami has long been a lightning rod for hurricanes. It was 25 years ago.
I was there for Andrew.
Yeah. 25 years ago, Hurricane Andrew swamped South Florida. One time, my parents and I took a tour of Homestead, which got hit really bad. We could barely tell that anything had happened to the Homestead area because it seemed like everywhere we went, all we saw was one luxury house after another. And also, there's an Air Force base in the Homestead area that people don't know about. So it was obvious that that town was in good hands because the Air Force was able to help a lot of people rebuild their lives, so to speak.
I was in Fort Lauderdale at Harbor Beach at the time, me, my mom, and my brother, when Andrew happened. We had to actually evacuate our hotel because it was right by the ocean. We had to go to the Cypress Hill Marriott. And we were in this ballroom with a bunch of other families, trying to wait out the storm in August of '92. Then we had to go to a Hilton hotel out somewhere else. So we had to go from one place to another. It took us, I think, a few weeks to finally get back to our hotel in Harbor Beach when it was safe for us. But we got out. We were lucky that we escaped any, the wrath, and we were lucky to have our lives intact and all of us together. It just kind of reminded me, Irma, of that time with Andrew. Again, though, our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Florida, and that their lives will become solvent again, and that everything's all right. And you know what today is also? Today is September 11th, 2017. It was 16 years ago to this very day that we lost over 3,000 of our fellow citizens in the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in Pennsylvania.
Yep. And
we would like to remember every single one of those people's lives and their souls and everything about them. It was a national tragedy that changed our lives forever.
I think to this day, today is being called Patriots Day here in the city. There's another Patriots Day of the same name that occurs in April up in New England. But this Patriots Day is different simply because of the fact that a lot of policemen, a lot of firefighters, EMTs, court officers, Port
FDNY.
Authority police, and ordinary citizens who are just trying to get from point A to point B on a plane
from different parts of the world.
Yeah, wound up being made into sacrificial lambs by a group of cowards who have their own interpretation of what God wants them to do with their lives.
But
it's gotten to the point where not only do we never forget, we never give up either. We never give up. We never back down. We never live in the face of fear.
And we could not rebuild the tower, and look what we have now.
Yep.
The new Freedom Tower.
We've got the Freedom Tower.
The two fountains, the reflecting pools to remember these 3,000 plus souls who lost their lives, but will never be forgotten.
It's interesting. That day canceled the rest of, not necessarily canceled, but it postponed the week in sports, which meant the second week of the NFL season wound up getting pushed back. Major League Baseball season wound up getting pushed back another week. And 10 days later, the Mets had their first home game at the former Shea Stadium when they played the Braves.
That was
And
a
Mike
memorable game.
And Mike Piazza had that very famous home run that he hit off Steve Carsey.
But it was not even just the home run. But what I loved in the beginning was the two teams, having that embrace of each other, that sportsmanship. In the face of tragedy, we're all one country, we're all one nation.
And the Mets were wearing, instead of wearing their usual blue hats with the orange interlocking and wire at the front, they had hats from the FDNY and the fire department and the court officers and the EMTs.
And the Port Authority. They had all the different departments, the people who gave their lives to help other people live.
And as it turns out, 2 firefighters who survived the terrorist attacks wound up getting honored in Foxborough. And those 2 firefighters happened to be Joe Andruzzi's brothers. Joe Andruzzi's brothers were very brave firefighters, and they actually were honored in Foxborough for the Patriots home game that day.
And for those of you who don't know, Joe Andruzzi, he was a former Patriots player, of course, who grew up in Staten Island.
Went to New Dorp High School, then played college ball at Southern Connecticut State, bounced around a little bit with the Packers and the Browns, but made his mark as one of the starting offensive linemen with the Patriots and won a couple of championships with them.
To all the people that were affected, their families, to all the people around the world, we just send our thoughts, our prayers, regards to, everybody that was affected on this day, that their names shall never be in vain, that they will always be remembered forever and ever till the end of time. Now,
as far as baseball is concerned, the Yankees had themselves a very, very important weekend. Not only did they take 2 out of 3 from the Texas Rangers, they were able to gain ground a little bit on the Red Sox. I think now the deficit is only 3.5 games in the Eastern Division. And now these pennant races are starting to come into focus because the Nationals became the first team to make the playoffs this year. They practically coasted to the NL East title. And what has happened with the Dodgers? 10 losses in a row, 14 of their last 15 they've lost, and suddenly things are tight in the National League West.
Well, right now the Diamondbacks are sort of hot in their trail, and the Rockies are coming up too, and they're both in the top 2 spots in the National League wild card.
And the Rockies
picture.
are being gained upon by, of all people, the Brewers, who've played really good baseball this season.
I know, both the Brewers and the Cardinals are 3 games behind the Rockies for that second wild card spot. And if you look at the American League East right now, the Yankees are hot on the Red Sox trail by 3.5 games.
And the Yankees lead that first wild card spot, and they're being joined by the Twins right now, but the Twins are
barely holding on.
Yeah, they're barely holding on. They just have a 1-game lead over the Angels.
And then you look at the American League West, which should be clinched at some point soon with the Astros. I think they will sometime either this week or next week. And then the Central Divisions, right now the Indians have won 18 straight games, which is unbelievable in and of itself.
And they're this close to setting an American League record for the longest winning streak in Major League Baseball history.
As for locally, our Staten Island Yankees are in the New York Penn League playoffs. They lost their first game 5-2 in 13 innings on Saturday against the Hudson Valley Renegades due to the fact that they won the McNamara division this past Wednesday in 6 innings. I was at that final home game, and they won. Yeah, that's right. We both were. I saw you at the end. That was awesome seeing you there. It was a good game, though.
Yes, it was.
And they won 4-1 yesterday to tie things up. Now they forced a game 3 Tuesday. If you get a chance, please, folks, go see a Staten Island Yankee game. The ticket prices are reasonable.
And the atmosphere is wonderful.
It's fun. And you get a good view and a good team and game. And they're just 1 game away from their second Penn League championship appearance in 3 years. As for the
U.S. Open, Rafael Nadal wound up winning the men's title, and Sloane Stephens won her very first U.S. Open women's title and her very first Grand Slam title.
Nadal beat Kevin Henderson 6-3, 6-3, 6-4. Sloane Stephens beat fellow American Madison Keys 6-3, 6-love. And unfortunately, our New York Liberty are eliminated from the WNBA playoffs 82-68 at the hands of the Washington Mystics.
Well, that's officially going to do it for us, folks. We certainly hope that you enjoy the rest of the week in sports. For everyone here, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Mary.
Good night, everyone.
Peace out.